So this week for our movement breakdown, we're going to talk about wide grip rack pull-ups. These rack pull-ups are seemingly a little bit more simple than traditional pull-ups, and if you just evaluated them objectively, you would be correct. But there are a few ways that we can go about making this movement much more effective than traditional pull-ups, especially for hypertrophy, which is, I think, what most people are going to be looking for from pull-ups anyway. So the first thing we have to look at is the actual setup. So much different than a traditional pull-up where you just have a rigid fixed bar. We're gonna have to set up a bar here in J-hooks in a rack and make sure that it's set to our height. So whenever we're doing that, I like to think of it about sternum to nipple level. I think that's gonna be a really good bet for most people who don't have like monkey arms. But here, the biggest thing that you wanna look at is having a wide grip on the bar. And then as you get under the bar and elevate your feet, like this on a bench, on a block, on a box, however you want to do it, you want to make sure that your butt is hanging about a ½ inch or an inch off the floor at the very extended bottom here. So with your arms completely straight and you just hanging out here, you want to make sure that your butt is free swinging and not just like sitting on the floor, right? So from that point, whenever you're setting up, already kind of mentioned it, already talked about it a little bit, we have our bench right here, which is gonna allow us to actually elevate our feet off the floor and create more of that dead hang. If you do want to push back and regress a little bit more rather than actually having your legs elevated, you could have your feet flat on the ground and give yourself a little bit of a leg assist. But for this one, we're just gonna go with that actual dead hang there. So you want that bench, block, box, whatever you're using to be about knee height, maybe even a little bit higher depending on how much assistance you want or the angle of the pull that you want it to be at. But for this one, maybe a little bit too low, we'll just go with it. But you also want it a far enough distance away to where you can actually keep your torso relatively vertical at the bottom of the movement. And as you pull yourself up through the movement, you're not going to get pushed back this way or get pulled that way because the bench is too close or too far away. So with that being said, I'll go ahead and demo a few movements or a few reps, excuse me, so that everyone can see exactly what that looks like. So again, hands should be a little bit wide, whatever is comfortable to you. Your feet and ankles are gonna be on the edge of the box or bench. And from here, you're gonna pull until your elbows are about 90 degrees. So here, pull up, and then getting a full stretch at the bottom and allow your shoulder blades to elevate all the way into your ears. So you don't wanna try and pull yourself all the way up here because you're losing a lot of power and a lot of what the intent is, and that is actually your upper mid back and even your rear delts here. You're not trying to turn this into a lat movement. So here, and then full stretch, about eye level, and full stretch. So for the rack pull-ups, a couple of really common mistakes that we're gonna see relatively often whenever any new trainee is performing them, someone who doesn't have a good amount of proprioception, body awareness, and also like understanding of what the movement is catered towards. A lot of people are gonna run into just keeping their shoulder blades really bound up while they're actually performing the movement. So like what was mentioned before in the cues, one of the biggest things that we're looking for here is free shoulder blade movement. This is an upper back, mid back type of exercise. That's what the intent is for. It's not a lat movement. So we actually do want to see that full elevation in the stretch and that full depression and even retraction at the bottom of the movement. So here, whenever people are performing that incorrectly, it looks just like an inverted arm curl. So you're here, everything is bound up. They don't actually allow that full stretch of the shoulder blades and then driving down hard to actually get that mid back engaged. And then another big mistake that we'll see is having this foot bench elevation box, whatever it's gonna be for most people. It's either gonna be too far away, which is going to cause you to be out of position and turn it more into an inverted row, or it's gonna be too close. And if it's too close, then the bench will be too far up on your calves, and you're actually not gonna get enough of a resistance from that. You want it to be far enough away to where you can have your heels, maybe even your ankles on the edge of the bench so that the majority of your body weight is actually going to be acting as resistance. So, lastly, another big mistake that I see, and I actually have not been demoing this correctly up until this point because it's just kind of a burden. But using straps. So anytime you're doing any kind of overloading, rowing, deadlift, pulling movement, anything like that, you never want your grip to be the limiting factor. So here, you always want to make sure that you use any kind of strap. So these are old school straps. Most people are going to be using Versa grips, which are probably going to be much easier for this type of movement. But you want to make sure that you're strapped in here so that whenever you're performing your set, you're not going to be limited by your grip before your upper back, before your rear delts are actually giving way. And lastly, I'm just going to show everyone really quick how to actually add load to the rack pull-up so that whenever you're performing this, you get really proficient with it. Body weight is a little bit too easy. You can add a little bit more weight. I'm going to use a plate here because a plate will sit in my lap a little bit easier. You can use a dumbbell. I've seen people use easy bars to do this as well. There's a lot of ways that you can do this, but a plate tends to sit really nicely in your lap whenever you're doing it. Have something behind you that you can sit on, that you can actually set the load on your lap and not have it fall off. While you're doing this, you want to make sure that you have a backwards angle. So if you have a dumbbell, if you have a plate, it's not just going to slide off your legs here. So you might need to be up on your tippy toes. Grab the bar, and then this is actually going to be kind of key. You have to be very coordinated to do this. So as you slide your hips off, you're going to make sure that they drop below the load. And just kind of walk yourself out, heels up on the bench or box, and then from there, you're good to go. Takes a little bit of coordination, but everyone can do that. And especially if you're lucky enough to have a partner who can add that load into your lap whenever you're already in position, that's even better and will make it way, way, way more effective as a movement.